I would like to call to order the Charter Township of Chesterfield regular township board meeting for Tuesday, September 12th, 2023 to order. Could we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 3, roll call. Clerk Berry, would you call the roll? And I would ask that Trustee Domink had a prearranged absence. Their note.
Supervisor Kersten.
Here.
Treasurer Elliott.
Here.
Trustee Anderson.
Here.
Trustee Joseph.
Here.
Trustee Vosberg.
Here.
Clerk Berry is here.
Item 4, the approval of agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Motion by Clerk Berry, supported by Supervisor Kersten. Clerk Berry.
Clerk Berry, aye. Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Item 5, presentations. There are 2 presentations scheduled tonight. Director Bassett, the podium is yours.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Michael Ogden to step over, please. So Sergeant Ogden now, as of officially this evening, you're now transitioning, and you and I privately talked, but the position of sergeant is probably the most impactful position on how the officers experience their time with the agency and how whether they feel treated, supported, taken care of. It really is dependent upon that sergeant position. So your position is so critical within our agency. Your responsibilities, obviously, as an officer, we all are given immense responsibilities, but now your responsibilities are not only those immense responsibilities of serving our community, but now you're expected to serve our people, our team, and our officers. So there's a lot on your shoulders, but knowing you personally, I know I have full faith that you're going to do excellent at this. With that, and Clerk Berry, do you want to do them both at the same time, both swearing-ins, or how would you prefer to do it? Okay, all right, we'll do okay, that sounds good. So with that, I'd also ask Robert Fitzpatrick, step up here. This is our second promotion, and Sergeant and now Lieutenant Fitzpatrick. So as a sergeant, you still get to be in between, right? You're still a police officer and a supervisor, but now you're transitioning completely to the administrative world. But the administrative world is critical in making sure that our organization has all of the tools, has all of the pieces necessary to keep us, forward-looking, making sure that we're doing best practice, making sure that we're ready for what the challenges of tomorrow. And without administration, our current administration team, that's not going to happen. Our officers won't have what they need, and they won't be ready to serve the community. And I'm confident that you are ready for this position. I'm confident and excited for both the sergeant and lieutenant promotions to be filled. With that, can we step to the front?
Thank you. Congratulations, Sergeant Ogden. Congratulations, Lieutenant Fitzpatrick. Mike. Item 6, department reports. We'll give the group a second to exit. Item 6, department reports. I'm going to start off with the supervisor's department report tonight. Within the last hour and a half, I got a phone call from the governor's office, and she is expanding our declaration of emergency to include Macomb, or to include Chesterfield and the city of New Baltimore in regards to the flooding event that occurred a couple weeks ago. This event was impactful, and it took a lot of work to get to this point. I just want to put some thank yous out. Number one, I'd like to thank Governor Whitmer's office and staff, County Executive Mark Hackle's staff, Drain Commissioner Candace Miller and her staff, Senator Hertel, Representative Jay DeBoyer, Representative Joe Argona, Representative Alicia St. Germain, Department of Roads Brian Santo and his staff. Particularly would like to thank Emergency Manager Brandon Lewis, who oversaw the declaration, County Commissioner Phil Kraft. Most of all, again, I'd like to, and I've done this already, I'd like to thank the township employees and staff who performed during this event and then went back out and did the evaluations throughout the community, especially our water, sewer, DPW, public services staff, facilities and operations, and then on our behalf, public safety staff, and then particularly Fire Chief Craig Miller, who oversaw our operational plan, our emergency operation assessment on both dates. So the good news is we have some help coming. We will look forward to whatever the governor provides further details tomorrow in the morning. Couldn't have done it without everybody's help and without everybody's input. Just some quick notes. Our emergency center was up and running that night with all staff that was called back in. I'd like to note that our township pumps and structures were all immediately and physically checked, in operation and functioning properly. They were just at capacity or exceeded capacity. And there were no pump failures within our systems operated by the township. The very next, just some action we took right afterwards, the next week was a review. We immediately sat down and looked at several issues that we may have to address in the future. Number one is the review and maintenance of detention and retention ponds. We have to discuss reestablishing SAD districts for the maintenance and care of detention ponds that the township, through history, maintains. We have to discuss that at further length. Are they within design specs? Are they within standards as originally designed? And that's an action that we have already begun. And then ultimately, who's responsible? There may be some questions that we'll take a look at, see who is responsible. But again, we've already undertaken that task. We've got legal, Attorney Siebert's involved in it intimately, and we'll continue to do that. I want to just say that we inspected over 400 homes in the township that have been provided that reported some sort of damage from the water, the rain event, and we will continue to work again with Macomb Emergency Management, the State Police, Division of Emergency Management, and we hope that the declaration that the governor will release tomorrow will kind of address a lot of these issues, maybe a solution as to what we can do to help the residents that were affected. And with that, I will go to Clerk Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. We have a couple of announcements from the clerks as well as election departments to update everyone on. First and foremost is to remind everyone that our passport service will be permanently discontinued as of 9/30/23. So for those who are interested in getting a passport processed here in Chesterfield Township, you want to make that appointment or get into our office before the 30th of September. That will be our last day for processing or accepting new passport applications. The October late night passports obviously is being canceled because we will be discontinuing our role as a passport agent as of 9/30/23. Secondly, from the Elections Department, the absentee ballot applications for those who live in the Anchor Bay School District, and we'll be deciding the millage this November. Your absentee ballot applications should be getting received soon. They are in the process of going out now, so you should be receiving that application. When you receive that application, you are going to notice you will also have the option at that time to be added to the permanent absentee ballot list. That is different from the absentee ballot application list that we have had for many years. The absentee ballot list is the new provision from Proposal 22-2, whereby you will simply, if you indicate you want to be placed on the permanent ballot list, you will receive a ballot every election. You will never have to fill out another application again unless you change communities. So long as you are here in Chesterfield, that will be a perpetual absentee ballot application, and you will be placed on the absent ballot list. So that is different. I'd like to make sure that distinction is clear for our residents as well as our board members to understand. We will be sending out informational and educational materials to communicate that to our voters and our residents, so please be advised you're going to be receiving a lot of communication from the clerk's office over the next several months. And if you ever have any questions, please direct individuals to call the clerk's office and we will answer those for you. The actual absentee ballots for that Anchor Bay School millage election will be available on September the 28th. We will not have ballots available until that date, but after that date, we will have ballots available in the township offices in the event that you would like to come in, receive that absentee ballot, and vote it at that time. We will not be offering early voting for this election. The early voting provision will be started here in Chesterfield for the presidential primary in next February. So we will not be offering early voting for this November school election for the Anchor Bay School District, but we will have absentee ballots available for you to receive, vote, and then return here at the clerk's office beginning on September the 28th. The November election, again, is just for Anchor Bay School District. If you live in L'Anse Creuse or New Haven School Districts, you do not have an election this November. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
Thank you, Clerk Barry. Trustee Anderson.
Thank you. Notes from a couple liaison meetings here. The first one is the Public Safety Advisory meeting that Trustee Joseph and I met with Director Bassett and Chief Miller on September 6th. I'll keep it short here. There's 9 positions in our public safety between full and part-time firefighters, dispatchers, full and part-time, clerical, and police officers, keeping it short. Those positions are either at full strength or in a process of getting there. The one area is a part-time dispatch. They're looking at several candidates to fill that. The police department is setting up a peer support program. If the officers need assistance, it'll be kind of confidential, but the chief's working on that now in the department. Switching gears to the Historical Society, this weekend, September 16th, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. is a Chesterfield Historical Society's at the Village, is the Heritage Days. Show up between those hours and a lot of enjoy hand-on activities, games, kids candle making, rope making, corn grinding, scavenger hunt, and more. There won't be any cow tipping. Entrance fee is a donation of $1 per person, $2 for family, and I believe we'll also have the kid print program there. Is anyone addressing the big rig day? All right, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Jones.
Yeah, just a quick update from the, well, one thing, if I could, from our public safety liaison discussion having to do with staffing. We were talking specifically about fires, and I unfortunately had the experience of my neighbor's house tragically caught on fire, and Chesterfield Fire Department was on the scene immediately. And I was amazed when I looked out into the yard and I saw so many firefighters, and I didn't realize that we had that many. And of course we didn't, because they were all from neighboring departments. And the understanding that I got from our public safety meeting is that currently our fire department is operating on basically a mutual aid reliance, and that is that if there's a house fire in our township, odds are we're going to receive help from a number of neighboring communities. And that is, I think, as we talked with Director Bassett, our unfortunate reality. That is, we have currently 20 firefighters, and it is roughly the same number of firefighters that we've had as long as I've been in the township. The question becomes, what do we do in the future as we look to the north end and the growth that we see, and an additional fire station, and will we have the sufficient firefighters to man those stations? So that's an ongoing concern, and I was happy to hear Chief Miller and Director Bassett talk about the need for that in the coming years. The other committee that I sit on is the liaison to the library board, and I was a little nervous about getting here tonight because the library has extensive programming tonight. There was a lady there by the name of Irene Miller. Miss Miller is a Holocaust survivor, and she was probably the most compelling story that I had ever heard in person. You know, we've all read stories and, you know, seen movies and tragedies and horrific things that humans have to endure. Miss Miller is a very accomplished speaker, and she dedicates her life to educating and talking about her experience, not from a, and it was really intriguing to listen to her say, not from a, she doesn't tell her story with an effort to have people feel sorry for her. She wants desperately to make sure that people never forget the tragedy that occurred during World War II and the invasion of her country, Poland, and the Holocaust. She's an incredible lady. She dedicates her life now to the world hunger. She talks very vividly about experiencing hunger as a child for many, many years, and the thought of a child going hungry. But this is all available to us at our Chesterfield Township Library. Packed room, and those kinds of programs are something that's going on at the library many times a month. I would encourage people to check out the library at CHE, short for Chesterfield, chelibrary.org. Their list of events is always published. Their website is very well maintained. And this October, as we kind of gear up towards Halloween, they have a number of events geared towards young adults, teens, adolescents. There's programming for new parents and toddlers, so I would encourage residents to check out the Chesterfield Township Library. There's really something for everyone, and tonight it was unbelievably compelling, so thank you.
Thank you, sir. Trustee Mossberg.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. A follow-up to the report from Trustee Anderson. At the Heritage Day, there's also going to be Digging for Gold, a sandbox full of coins sponsored by First State Bank. There's going to be a craft show, and there's also vision screening available. In addition to that, Parks and Recreation will be hosting a big rig day from noon until 2 o'clock on this coming Saturday as well. And that's all big trucks coming in from our own DPW trucks, fire, those types, and then also commercial trucks from the community and businesses in the community. Parking for all of this will be at Green School, and shuttles will be running continuously from the parking lot at Green School over to this site here. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 7, public comments. Clerk Barry. Yes. Sorry. Item 7, there's public comments on the agenda items only. There's a 3-minute time limit. Clock will start when you begin to speak.
Paul Lafata, Chesterfield. The consent agenda, payment of bills, Department 248. The supervisor, S&P Global Ratings, Analytical Services for $23,000. There is no board-approved documentation. There's nothing that this was ever approved by the Township Board. It's a violation of the Township's purchasing policy. I don't know how we can approve this in a bill run. And it specifically states in item 7 that the failure to follow policy, Township will not be responsible for cost of goods ordered by any Township official outside of the policies and procedures. So I don't know how anybody up there can approve that if they follow process and procedures. It would be a lie. It would be an out lie. And then when we go to the purchasing policy, which is an agenda item, we're going to up the limits from $5,000 to $15,000. Then we're not going to write purchase orders. Well, the BS&A system ties the budget to the general ledger appropriations numbers so that when you write a purchase order, you know that you have a bank account. You're taking all the checks and balances away. You might as well throw all those hundreds of thousands of dollars for BS&A, and you might as well throw it in a trash can, because you're not going to be accounting for anything. You are going to throw all your checks and balances out the window. It is utterly ridiculous. You're taking away checks and balances, and you're giving somebody absolute powers. And that's not a way to run a township. It's bad. It's very bad. And every resident that's sitting here should stand up and tell you so. This is getting beyond belief. And the addendum on the walk says, according to ordinance, is Spalding DeDecker going to get 25% of this money that we're going to get, plus our match? Because if so, somebody should be looking into that, because this isn't what township dollars should be going to Spalding DeDecker just because it's got a pathway or a sidewalk next to it. You're wasting taxpayer dollars. You're wasting it. And it shouldn't end at the Meldrum Drain. It should be bridged to go over the Meldrum Drain. And there's a bridge over at the ballpark that could be utilized. If you bridge the Meldrum Drain, you'll let everybody in the Anchor Bay Harbor subdivision utilize the pathway. Ending it at the Meldrum Drain is just short-sighted.
Thank you, sir.
John Speaka, 53978 Connor Drive. Mr. Lafata touched upon a lot of things that I was going to mention in the bill run, so I'm not going to rehash that. He was spot on the bill run. And I want to thank the supervisor for taking Governor Gretchen Whitmer's phone call. So I'm glad you took the governor's phone call, because you don't take the residents' phone call. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. In regards to the regular agenda with the advertising billboard, well, I'm against that. I do not support that. Unfortunately, Chesterfield has, under Supervisor Kersten, become pay to play. So this billboard. I do not support that, and one of the things that I don't support with the billboard is, one, it goes against our master plan, and two, I don't want cannabis advertised on that, and I don't want any of you guys advertised on that. So, what you're proposing for the billboard isn't a proper fit, and it just wouldn't look good for the township. If you want to start with, you need to clean up the Gratiot corridor is the first place where you need to start. On the purchasing policy is ridiculous. You guys can't even stay within your $5,000. Between you guys and the department heads, you can't even stay within the means and be honest with a $5,000 policy. There's been many times that I've caught you on the bill run where you come in at $49.90, $49.95, or there's multiple bills on the same thing. And Supervisor Kersten, you're just as guilty for covering on the bill runs as the people that do it. So that $15,000 is absolutely ridiculous. So the department heads aren't responsible enough, and this board, the majority of this board, is not responsible enough. So that would be a no on that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any further comments?
Mike Horton, 50393 Bauer. So I see here in the 10A that there was a consideration for the billboard on Hall Road situation, and I believe that's what was discussed a few weeks back. And I'm hopeful that this time when it's brought up, is it going to be a much more clearer example? Because the last time it was up here, it was in a ludicrous fashion, and in the display for the public to see. And I think that if it's not done in such a professional manner, I can't see that this could be seen as a professional board operating under it. So thank you.
You touched base on the power supply plant. My question is, has funds been allocated to improve the power supply plant, considering what the township just went through with the recent flooding, in proportion to the growth in the district? There's been multiple publications recently about funding that has been allocated to the township for the improvement of the power supply plant. Some of them I think are slated to occur by the end of this year. Are those on target? And again, what has been done to this infrastructure in proportion to the growth in the area, say over the last decade?
Just a point of information for Mr. Joseph.
If you would leave your name on the card, we'll get back to you. You fill out a card, let somebody reach out. Sir, if you would, just for the record statement, just so we know it's ours. You don't have to, but if you could leave your name.
Jerry Beatty, 47909 Mallard. But just a point for Mr. Joseph, the Chesterfield Fire Department has a mutual aid agreement for all the surrounding departments, and they've had that for over 30 years. And it's worked pretty good for the departments around us and for us if you get into a major structure fire.
Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I was one of the people that, ladies and gentlemen of the board, I was one of the people on Forbes Street that had problems with the water damage. And I was wondering, if the pumps truly were working, and you say they were, and I have to believe you, but that morning my wife was on the street and there were workers there, and he told her the pump had failed. One of the township workers, and I'm not naming names. Another thing was that our trash pickup didn't get picked up, and I know that's not the board's fault. We have a contract with the with the trash contractor, but it didn't happen. And what I found out was I wasn't on a list. Now, I didn't understand which list I was supposed to be. Mr. Commissioner, I called your office. I didn't know which department I should have called. Well, I come to find out from a nice neighbor lady that I should have called the sewer department. My wife had spoke to a nice woman there. She took care of us. Our trash was gone. I appreciate that help that you gave us. Glad you talked to the governor. That's wonderful. I don't know, in the 34 years I've lived on that street, I've never had a flood in my basement. I put thousands and thousands of dollars into the construction around that home, just to, you know, to be waterproof, to support the foundations that weren't inspected properly by this township. And I'm not saying it's any of these board members' fault or any of these supervisors' fault, but it wasn't done. And it cost me a lot of money. And now this happens. Is there any guarantee that this is going to happen to me? I have a new furnace, a brand new hot water tank down there. Thank God my washer, dryer, freezer survived. I had guns that had gotten wet down there, and I'm up in arms. I don't know, should I buy more insurance? What should I do? Is it going to happen again? Why didn't it happen 30 years ago? Why didn't it happen when the lake flooded years ago? It happened now. Is it the infrastructure? Are we overburdened with all the new construction that's going on in the township, and our lower lying houses are getting flooded because of it, because they're overburdened? Is that what's happening to us? That's what I'm getting at. That's just what I wanted to say this evening. Thank you, sir.
Nancy Hutchinson, 49525 Callens Road. Going to change the subject for a little bit because one of the township employees told me that I should be a squeaky wheel. And I'm a squeaky wheel about Phragmites. Saw an article in the Macomb Daily last week. 6 or 7 communities have banded together to try to eradicate Phragmites in their communities. I happen to notice Chesterfield was missing. Just yesterday, I saw an article in the Oakland Press about the same thing happening with a few of their communities. I'm sorry, Mr. Joseph, I don't believe you when you say everybody didn't want the chemicals, because they managed to get all the Phragmites away from the paddle park, managed to clean up the Phragmites by Brandenburg. They have just recently got rid of all the Phragmites by the Salt River. Why am I losing at least 10 or 15 feet of land to those damn Phragmites every year? Won't be very expensive from, you know, what I've seen. And we're going to have no waterway left. It's just the way it is. No waterway at all. Thank you. And nobody from Parks and Rec answers the phone or returns calls.
Janice Young, Yorkshire. I want to address item 10B, changing the APO. This board is voting once again to change the administrative procedure order, the APO. I'd like to know what the purpose of the APO is, if this board, or any board for that matter, can simply make changes to it to fit their agenda or their narrative. It's actually quite ridiculous that the governing rules can be changed by the governing body at any time. And I'm appalled that any of you would allow department heads to spend up to $15,000 per item without board approval or public comment. They'll be spending my money and their money faster than we'll ever know, and we'll never know what they're spending it on unless we read the bill run line by line, which I know and you know most residents aren't going to do. The residents are fortunate that Mr. Spica and Mr. Lafata look out for our money by reading the bill run and exposing what they find. Mr. Lafata pointed out at the August 22nd meeting that you've already been allowing department heads to spend over $5,000 without approval. Once you loosen up our purse strings, no other board is going to tighten them up again, especially if they're as crooked and as shady as this board seems to be. I'm asking that you not change the existing APO number 11-2019 in connection with the purchasing policy. Item 11, the addendum for the sidewalks. This item is added at the last minute. This is another trick that this board has done before by adding items at the last minute after it's been posted. I understand the value of bike paths and walkways in a community. However, this board has missed the mark on what residents really need when it comes to that. The proposed resolution 2023-32 states, according to the master plan, 80% of resident survey respondents identified the lack of sidewalks and bike paths as the biggest challenge facing this township. Do I need to remind this board that a resident was just killed while walking home from work on Cotton Road? Do you think a Jefferson bike path is what he needed to stay alive while he was trying to earn a living? We need sidewalks where people actually use them. Take a look around this township and see where the grass is now a worn path. That's where we need sidewalks. Why are you not starting with those areas? There aren't even sidewalks leading to bus stops where people are obviously walking to get to. And I travel Cotton Road every day by car. On occasion, I even ride my bicycle to work, and that stretch of commute is by far the most dangerous. When will sidewalks be made a priority in that area, or even streetlights like you're doing on Jefferson? Which, if you need reminding, it's 99% residential over there. Please stop spending our money on what you want and spend it on what the residents really want and need.
Thank you, ma'am.
Christopher Pierrick, 33862 Embassy. Just to address a couple of the regular agenda items. The first one is the proposed billboard on Hall Road. I think it's ridiculous that the proposal is to put a 90-foot high billboard in that area that's going to advertise cannabis and other things. The next item is the recommendation to approve the APO for purchasing policy. I believe that's a complete waste of time of the board since the APO is not followed as it is today. And that's evident in the spending that happened with the Bassmasters. Don't even know if there's ever been a final tally on what the Chesterfield Township had to pay for that event. And then the third item is the item C is the proposed street light improvements on Jefferson. I'm all for better lighting for areas, especially with the recent fatality on Cotton Road. Hopefully this will help in that area. However, there's not a lot of information on the website for this agenda item, how it's going to happen. But if we look at how those LED lights were put on poles on Gratiot between 21 Mile Road and 23 Mile Road, they're all crooked. None of them are lined up because the poles are all bent. That's just a trigger for a migraine for somebody with OCD. So I hope that that is looked at and that's done in a better way. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any further comments?
Joe Kadich, I live on Sutton. A couple of the items I wanted to talk about. First of all, the sign was just talked about. I said last meeting, when you talked about this, you bypassed having a public call meeting on it deliberately. Here we go, you're talking more negotiations over this sign and still not involving a public meeting. This is township property. You're going to lease this property, you have to go and have a public meeting on it so people can air their views. It's not happening. The other thing that concerns me about it is people are talking about cannabis. I'm more worried about what's going to go up there besides cannabis. Is there going to be anything in the lease saying you cannot have campaign people up there? Are people sponsoring you guys in your next campaign? I'd like to see something in at least that if there's anything to do with political campaigning, whether it's for people or a subject, that if he does that, he loses his lease. It shouldn't be allowed to make waves or make headway for you guys to make your point. And I think that's the only way that's it. And then the other thing is I found out from another individual that called everybody last week that wanted to enter into a bidding on this, and he was rebuffed. So you skipped basically the public meeting that should have opened it up to everybody. You're skipping the who can enter into this. You're just locking in somebody on it. I mean, what's this all about? Doesn't make any sense unless you're going to get some type of give back from it. So if you do, I'd like to say, basically, when you do write the lease, sure, I'm not going to stop it, but you put something in there that it prohibits any political advertising on there. The other one is the pathway, which when you set the engineering on it, I asked the question, why is it going through the woods over by the creek over there to the back of the school? The original planning had that thing going down Jefferson to Cotton Road, and then there is supposed to be an extension down Cotton to basically across the Gratiot. And where did that go? Somebody changed the planning on it? It had been there for years. And all of a sudden, it's going through this section back there that leads to the back of a high school.
Thank you, sir.
I'd like to continue.
Any further comments from the public? Any further comments from the public? Time's up, sir. Time's up. Time's up, sir. Appreciate it. Time's up. Any further comments from the public? No. You can set it right there. We'll get it. You can set it. We'll get it. Any further comments from the public? Item 8, consent agenda. Clerk Berry.
Oh.
Item 8, Clerk Berry. Item 8, the consent agenda. Clerk Berry.
All items under the consent agenda are considered routine by the board and will be enacted in one motion. There is no separate discussion of these items. If discussion of any item is required by a board member, it will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. A, approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting of August 22nd, 2023. Approval of the payment of bills as submitted by the Finance Department.
Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda as read? Supervisor Kersten will make a motion to approve the consent agenda as read.
Support. Second.
Treasurer Elliott. Comments from the board? Comments from the board?
Are we entitled to comments on the consent agenda now?
You know what, you're correct, I'm sorry. Clerk Berry, would you?
I have some.
I apologize.
Okay.
Clerk Berry, I apologize. Clerk Berry, would you call the roll? Trustee Joseph, do you have comments?
My comment is more of a question. Are we going to address any of the questions regarding the bill run from the residents? And I don't know how the new format works. What do we do with questions, from the podium regarding bill runs and such?
So we can answer their questions on our time at the end?
Oh, the whole
And
3
then-
minutes?
Yep.
Oh, perfect.
And then they have, we've asked them to supply cards with names and address, so we'll reach out to them.
Oh, privately?
Yeah.
Great, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further comments from the board? Clerk Berry?
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Nope.
Trustee Joseph.
No.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Item 9, public hearings. There are no public hearings scheduled. Item 10, regular agenda. Clerk Berry.
10A, to consider the terms of a proposed billboard advertising display lease submitted by 2020 Outdoor Media LLC for the lease of township property located at 25025 Hall Road, parcel ID number 150931351051025.
Supervisor Kersten will make a motion to approve. Is there support?
Support.
Second by Trustee Joseph. I'll give just some brief background on this. This company approached us several months back after reached out seeking some sort of branding, some sort of potential revenue generation on township property. This was really the only company that reached back. We've then entered into long discussions with them, as was stated in previous board meetings. We're up to about 20 months on kicking this around and discussing it. Met with the petitioner, the requester. We included several times. We created a lease agreement that is within the packet. Their counsel met with our counsel. I bring it forward tonight to see if there's enough support to move forward with this. Obviously, there is a next step to this with planning and zoning, but I think we have an agreement that in the context achieves a goal of branding for the township and also allows for some sort of township promotional advertising on the board for the township. With that being said, I didn't receive any questions or directly from the board members on this other than what was presented by the residents tonight. So the next step for this would be moved to planning and put it on a planning agenda, have them look at the design. And again, I'll clarify what was presented and what was seen previously was a concept design. There was a 90-foot drawing. The 90-foot basically was, it really was irrelevant. It was just a concept to look at what it could look like moving forward in a design phase. So that pretty much encompasses where we're at today. It's taken a long time to get here, and I'd ask that the board move forward with allowing this discussion to continue and move to the design aspect of it. Questions from the board? Trustee Joe.
The process has been probably, I would say, a year and a half, maybe, from the start. I came into the discussions quite late. To be blunt, I think the concept and the opportunity is a great one for our township. The way that it was handled, I think, botched. I can't say it any other way. It was botched. This is a great opportunity for the township from this standpoint, and it is consistent with our master plan. But I understand the frustration that was expressed at the podium, and some of the concerns about a backdoor deal or an opportunity for politicians to get free ad space on a billboard, 90 feet. Cannabis advertisements and so forth. Like I understand the concerns that come from that, but I can just tell you from my vantage point, shortly after the master plan, and I'm going back to Mr. Arroyo's time with our planning department, and what he proposed and what the planning commission approved and ultimately the board approved was the concept that the supervisor spoke of branding, and the idea of where are you when you are along 94 or you come into the township or leave the township? Where are our indicators that you are in Chesterfield or leaving Chesterfield? And so the idea was to promote our community with additional signage. That's very, very expensive. You know, entering and leaving all main thoroughfares, 94. We've seen some cost estimates that we really just are not in a position to realize. Mr. Aram's company is a small independent. It is really a David and Goliath story when it comes to outdoor advertising. I think most of the advertising and billboards that you see are owned by national companies. CBS, Lamar, Outlook. If you look at the bottom of the billboard, you'll see the little tag there. These are national companies, and their cost associated with advertising there is quite expensive. Mr. Aram, throughout his entire career, has gone into communities, Macomb, Oakland, Wayne, he has them all over, and what he tries to do is bring about low-cost, affordable advertising for small businesses. If you look at any of the billboard customers that this company hosts or their customers, they're typically small businesses and government operations. So Mr. Aram's company works closely with Macomb County. They do a lot of free and low-cost advertising for Macomb County Veterans Affairs, roads, and the offer and the discussions that I've had, and just to be clear, I have never taken any campaign contribution from this company. I don't have any financial connection to this company, but I do see an opportunity for the township to take advantage of some real quality advertising, not just at the location that Mr. Aram is proposing we build on, but the property that we own, that you own, is really unbuildable. It's not anything that could be used in a traditional real estate way. It is a piece of property that has utilities and easements that are so encumbering the property that there is no room to build or do anything with. In this particular case, the billboard that is being proposed, and talking with Mr. Aram many times, takes up the amount of space of a large vehicle tire. They will not be erecting any kind of buildings. It's certainly not a 90 foot, and it will contain not only advertising for the township events, but those will be carried over in this lease agreement that's been worked out. Those will carry over to other advertising billboards that Outdoor Media owns. So we have a great opportunity here, and I'm sorry that the process has really not gone the way I would have liked it to have gone, but it is a great opportunity nonetheless. And in terms of the contract inclusion of candidate advertising by law, and if you pay attention to campaign season, you'll see politicians will have billboards up and down 94, and they, of course, use that as a way of getting messages out. Trustee Anderson and I purchased a billboard along 94, and I can tell you that every company that we dealt with made it very, very clear they are at risk of losing really their company if it comes down to allowing government officials or politicians of any sort to advertise at a rate cheaper than you could advertise. So if I know that you're proficient now with pumping out basements, so if Kadich Rescue Services wanted to advertise at an Outdoor Media billboard, you will get the same rate that I will get by law. They cannot provide me with a cheaper rate than you. And that is something that's universal in that space of outdoor advertising. So there are no cut rate deals, and there's a lot of skin in the game for the petitioner should they try to cut something like that. So it's not really in play. This particular Outdoor Media, if you look at their billboards, you won't see a lot of cannabis advertisers. There are a tremendous amount. I think that by and large their customers are small businesses, and they are an approved vendor, a Gold Star vendor with the county. So this is not a fly-by-night company. This is a very hard-working entrepreneur that's been doing it his whole life, And going up against the national companies to provide small businesses is something that Mr. Aram is very, very proud of. I'm in big favor of this opportunity for the township, but I do apologize for the way that it was presented because it does a disservice to what we're trying to accomplish here. But I think in the long run, it's of great benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Clerk Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
No, they can't. You can't limit your public officials.
Please don't interrupt the meeting again. Clerk Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I'd just like to ask Attorney Siebert just to remind the board and members of the public on the Supreme Court decision that does not allow us, and we actually changed our sign ordinance because of it, we cannot dictate content of a sign. We can only dictate the size and location and so on, but the actual content, it's a Supreme Court ruling, so whatever goes up there, they have to follow the Supreme Court ruling. So if Attorney Siebert could just remind everyone of that, that'd be helpful.
That is, I know the Supreme Court case you're referring to, and that is not applicable in this particular case. Remember, we are leasing property to a private company. There's no government action here. We're simply leasing a piece of property to a private entity who happens to be in the billboard industry. And while it's true with respect to township signs that as government we cannot regulate content, that's First Amendment protected, this is not a government action. This is not a government function. This is not a billboard that's being operated by government. We are telling this vendor, or you may tell this vendor, that you're going to lease a piece of property to them for 30 years or better so that they can build a private billboard, and on that private billboard we will have space so many seconds for every 80 seconds to put on township information, but the rest of the content is private. So that's the First Amendment applies. The First Amendment applies to government action. The Bill of Rights deal with government action. There's no government action here. We're leasing it to an individual company, and they can put whatever information on that sign that they think is beneficial to their business. So I know the case you're talking about, but I don't think it applies here.
My point
Now,
is, we can't regulate the content.
That is not to say, because and again, I have only been involved in one meeting of any substance regarding the lease, but that's not to say you couldn't negotiate a term with the tenant to limit the content, but I would be surprised if you're going to get a tenant that would agree to that.
Clerk Berry, floor is done.
Oh, that was all. That was
Okay.
perfect. Thank you.
Trustee Vosberg.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I have some questions regarding the contract itself. I don't question the company at all. I've known them to be, they have good reputation for what the services they provide. What I do have, I am concerned about the controlling or approving messages that go up there. But the bigger part is the length of time on this contract for 30 years, and I don't see an opt-out clause. Some of our contracts we have, either side can decide to opt out. Maybe this is different because they're actually putting a structure up. I'm not sure, but I do think 30 years is just way too long. And I don't see sign dimensions in here. I know you said it has to be approved by the Planning Commission, and that's fine. If they have something they want to come up with, it'd probably be acceptable to us, but I don't see it in there. But my biggest thing is that, and then the other is I don't see, other than in-kind service, I don't see a dollar amount that we would receive in rent. And if I don't know what the value of that in-kind would be, because that obviously, there is value to the in-kind time we would be allowed, but it's not listed in here.
That's correct. There was no dollar exchange. It was simply the 80 seconds, every 8 seconds for every 8 seconds every 80 seconds. That was the return for payment. And then obviously the logo and labeling of the sign, which again has to go through planning and zoning. Their plan has to conform or interact with the Planning Commission for approval. So kind of left that one open for that board to address.
Is 30 years the length of time that usually for a private rental of somebody erecting something on our property and then us allowing it to be there?
Our assumption at the time during discussions with them that 30 years would be long enough, and then obviously it would have to come back to the board for further discussion or renewal.
Yeah,
Let me clarify that. There are two automatic 10-year renewals in here at the option of the tenant, not at the option of the township. So this is a 30-year lease with two 10-year automatic renewals unless the tenant decides to give us notice of non-renewal.
Okay,
So
then
it is potentially a 50-year lease.
Makes it 50.
Right.
It could potentially be 50 years.
It is a 50-year unless
And-
they decide to walk
And
after
then,
30.
and I guess technology will change over the years. It maybe won't even be relevant. Maybe we don't even have billboards anymore. I don't know. But I just don't see enough in here to protect us from if we decide that it's not something we would like to have or we don't like how it's working out. If it's not doing what we thought, we're thinking it would help us to brand the township, but if it's showing things that that don't brand the township, we don't have any out. We don't have any way to counteract that or to, other than a friendly discussion with them. And probably with this person it would work, but there's also the company's allowed to assign that to someone else. They can sell it, and then we don't have any control over that. So for that reason, I don't favor it the way it is written now. If it is rewritten, renegotiated, and comes back to us with some of those issues taken into consideration and perhaps the time either shortened or have some type of opt-out, I could be in favor of it. Thank you.
Treasurer Elliott?
Is that something that you'd be willing to do, is to send it back and make a few changes?
Sure, we can sit down with them again and if you have specific points you want to point out, as you did tonight, we can sit with them again. They're open, they're willing. Again, this was a very candid discussion with them. They aren't bad to work with. We can adjourn it if that's the direction you would like to go, sit down for further discussion, yes. We can postpone it for 2 weeks. Do you want to discuss them now, or do you want to discuss the terms that you would like to add, or do we do it with the petitioner? I'm open.
I would like to see the time reduced with either side being able to offer an extension of time, or negotiate that extension of time. And I'm thinking 5 to 10 years. And the other, some way that we can control the message, or at least advise on the message, and if we don't like the message, that would be a reason we could opt out. And we would have to be specific about what that would be. I would not want said the phrase before, lewd and lascivious type of messaging on there. There's other things that would be offensive to a lot of people. And then the other would, related to, let's see, I guess the size of the sign, it would be helpful to know what that is. I realize it's going to planning, but it would just be helpful to know what that would look like. And if any other members have something else they would like to see discussed, that would be great.
Thank you. Treasurer Elliott, any?
It sounds like this is probably an appropriate conversation with the petitioner at the same time, so I would say.
I'm sure we could make that arrangement happen with the petitioner. Petitioner wants to speak now, or you just want to defer until a future date, we sit down and discuss these items?
No, I think we'll wait.
Okay.
Mr.
Any further
Supervisor,
comments
if I-
from the board?
yeah, I just was curious, Trustee Vosberg, the concerns that you had regarding content, I don't know that we'll ever have a contract that allows us to dictate the content or the signs. I'm not understanding what your additional contractual requirement would be, because we're leasing, the exchange is we get 8 seconds out of every 80. Are you proposing that we also dictate what advertisers the petitioner can sell to? And how would we regulate that? Because it seems like we might as well just say goodbye to the opportunity, because I don't know. What do you envision them only being allowed to advertise?
It's not a
Trustee
matter.
Gosser?
Yeah, thank you. I would not tell them you may only advertise, you may only sell advertising to certain companies. That's not at all, but it would be the type of advertisement, and enter into discussion with that. It may show, we may, with assistance or input from an attorney, say you can't, what I'm just asking for now can't be done. I'll live with that, but I do think we can work on the other items, the length of the contract and the ability to sell the contract to another person without some input from us.
Well, it's only been a year and a half, so I'm sure we can, you know, what's another few months?
Thank you. Any further comments from the board? Any further? I'm sorry. Yes, you may. Sorry.
Good evening, members of the board, Mr. Supervisor. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sean Kelly, and I represent 2020 Outdoor Media, LLC. Just a few things I want to address real quick. Regarding the term of the lease, the 30 years with the 2 10-year extensions, this is an enormous project, which is going to be undertaken at extreme cost to my client. Reducing the amount of years in which my client can sell space on the board is going to be difficult, if not cost prohibitive. So that's why we've selected this term and essentially negotiated this amount of years with the township. I think with respect to the content, sort of in line with what Trustee Joseph said and Attorney Siebert said, the 2015 Michigan Supreme Court case that deals with content regulation, I don't know that it would be, and again, I'm not your attorney, I'm not trying to in any way influence the board or give legal advice, but I don't know that it would even be permissible or possible to enter into a contract where the township could regulate the messaging on the board, regardless of what companies my client might contract with. I just don't think it's possible. I think it might be unconstitutional for the township to attempt to regulate that messaging. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Now, 2 of the board. Treasurer Elliott.
Mr. Kelly, do you have any numbers of what that break even would be? So, you know, the eight seconds for every 80 seconds, and then say the cost of putting the billboard up. Do you have any kind of estimates on that?
Are you asking me what the value is of the advertising for the benefit of the township, that 8 seconds every 80 seconds?
Yes, do you know that?
Okay, I wasn't sure if you were asking that or the cost to my client to have a shorter term of years for the lease as
Yes, what would be the value of the 8 seconds?
It's roughly $2,000 per month per face. There's 2 faces on this sign, so it's $4,000 per month for the benefit of the township. The 8-second spot runs a total of roughly 1,080 times per day, which equates to approximately 800,000 spots of township advertising per year. So if you're talking $4,000 per month, that's $48,000 per year is the value of those 8-second time spots.
Thank you. Any further, Treasurer Elliott? Any further? Any further questions or comments from the board? Supervisor Kersten made a motion to approve the agreement as presented in the documents or in the agenda, supported by Trustee Joseph. Clerk Berry, do you call the roll? The lease that is prescribed.
Yeah, I want to be clear, because I had sent you a copy of a revised lease yesterday, because I had just received it very late on Friday. It's dated September 11th. That's the lease that you're voting on.
Correct.
Okay, I understand we still have to get back from the engineers the exact location to be determined, but I want to make clear that's the lease.
That's correct.
Okay.
Clerk Berry.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
No.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Clerk Berry. Aye.
Item 10B.
Item 10B is a recommendation to approve the changes to APO 11-2019 purchasing policy, effective date September 18th, 2023.
Supervisor Kersten will make a motion to approve the APO as presented. Is there support? I miss it. Trustee Vosberg. Supported by Trustee Vosberg. Just some background, there is an email that Finance Director Bauer sent to everyone, kind of describe the position and reason for this. Obviously, everything that we do is, there's the economics of it. The original, or the request to bring this to the board and ask for the increases, it is just the daily economics of the daily procedures of running a day-to-day business, where $5,000 somewhat on big projects becomes problematic. We just want to process them. There are proper provisions put in place for this. And some of the examples, again, that just off the top I'd like to address with you is just simple maintenance and care on large equipment that we have within the township. So that's really the reason behind this. And Director Bauer, or Finance Director Bauer's in her email kind of addressed some the issues that we face day to day. So that's the request here, and take any questions or comments from the board. Trustee Joseph.
As I read the proposed changes, anything that would be in the $15,000 range that is an emergency in nature, there are provisions to, we don't shut down the police department if they have an expense that exceeds the purchasing policy. There are already provisions within the existing purchasing policy that afford the ability to deal with emergencies. My problem with this change is it triples the amount of money that can be, the people's money that can be spent without ever talking to them. And so when we have a $15,000 expenditure, that's typically something that is planned, and that is typically, hopefully, through proper planning, we have the ability to review that and tell the people where their money goes. There are a number of items in the bill run that come suspiciously short of the $5,000, which I've questioned for years, because it seems like there's an attempt for multiple purchases, say on a project that linger just close but not above the $5,000 mark. And I don't like to see that, but now we're going to have the ability to have multiple $14,950 projects, and that really does scare me, because now you're talking about some real money. And the poor planning is not an excuse to usurp the people's oversight and their ability to check and balance. You don't even allow them the opportunity to come up during regular agenda items and contest a purchase now. They can do it 3 minutes on the front end. They can complain about it on the back end, but they don't get to be part of the deliberation process. So the week after you take their right to speak, you want to triple the ability to spend money without them having an opportunity to even see it on an agenda. They can just see it in the bill run, and I think that's tragic. I think that adds to an already unbelievably tone-deaf board that devalues our public and their input. and increasing the ability to spend their money 3 times over with one APO the week after, the board meeting after you take their right to speak is unconscionable to me, so I'm a firm no on this.
Thank you, sir. Treasurer Elliott?
I know that Vicki has been working on this, and I believe with several different people for a long time on various parts of this APO, just to clean it up in a lot of areas. And I know this dollar amount, this $15,000 dollar amount, was kind of a recommendation that was put out based on what she's seeing and purchasing. And I share your concerns, but if even if you said, you know, I want to leave it at 5,000, or you know, with inflation, 5,000 was a couple of years, so maybe 7,500 seems more realistic. I'd be okay with that. But do you have issue with in any other part of these policy changes that have also been recommended that we see in the red? Does it? I don't have any issue with that, but I understand that the dollar amount is a concern.
Issue? I'm sorry.
Thank you. Trustee Anderson?
Thank you. Trustee Joseph hit some of the salient points I was looking at. This document comes out, it's 17 pages, APO 11, 2019. I would hope you'd spend the time, look up our website, Township, take a read of the whole thing. You've got line upon line of redacted sentences, gallons of red paint or red ink on here replacing it. Tremendous wordsmithing, well put together. Yeah, and I'm not going to take a lot of time here, cite things that really I'm questionable about what you've already talked about. I'm of the opinion now, more than ever, we need to tighten our belt instead of expand the ability of department heads or delegates to make purchases at this time without the overview of the folks up here. I will not support it.
Thank you. Any further comments from the board? Clerk Berry?
Just a quick question. Oftentimes, I know that purchases will be made within a purchasing policy that we have, and then when it comes to the board, when it comes to the bill run, there's discussion oftentimes of, well, the expenditure was made, but we're not going to pay the bill. I've been the target of that on several occasions, even though it's completely within the purchasing policy. Then it's like, well, we don't like that, or we don't like this board member or that board member. We're not going to approve their expenditure. We're not going to approve the bill. And so my question is, I didn't see anywhere in here where it addressed that, and maybe it's not the appropriate place for it, but I just think that if we're going to approve this purchasing policy, has there been any discussion about when it comes to the bill run, then do board members still have the ability, if they're concerned about a particular purchase that was made, to not pay the bill if it hasn't been paid yet? Let's suppose on the credit card or something on that order. Is that fail-safe in there, or are we talking about a situation where monies have already been expended, it's got to be paid?
I think your latter's the truth. The money's already been expended, and we've already provided the service. More often than not.
Thank you.
Trustee Joseph.
Yeah, just as a quick answer to Treasurer Elliott's question, yeah, I do have a number of other problems with the proposed APO change, and specifically the complete striking of what was previously section 2.3, and that is the qualification-based selection process. The QBS process was put into place. We didn't agree on a lot of things, but I happened to agree with Supervisor Accavetti at the time because we had a lot of contracts that were previously had been extended without a bid. We had no bid contracts. The QBS selection process, I thought, was a fairly valuable tool, and the practice was when we had a contract that was coming up for bid, whether that be engineering or planning or single waste hauler. The board looked for volunteers, and eventually the supervisor made appointments. There really wasn't a competitive campaigning for that. If you were available and you could volunteer to sit on the QBS panel, you could help narrow the vendor selection list down and then present to the board. With big purchases and big vendor contracts, the QBS process was something that I thought was a benefit, and it allowed the committee to not just look at the lowest bid, but also the quality of the bid and the company that was bidding and their track record, and so you got a much deeper dive, and it was a fairly exhaustive process, but I participated on a few. One was planning, and I thought the inclusion of the QBS process was very illuminating in terms of seeing the vendors that came forward. This APO strikes that, and it eliminates that. So in addition to the dollar amount, I have a problem with the elimination of the QBS process.
Thank you, sir. Any further comments from the board? Any further? Trustee Vosberg?
Excuse me, was that, I saw that it was struck out, but there's so many changes in there, I thought it was addressed somewhere else. What was the reason that was stricken?
The striking of that, Trustee Vosberg, just is left very cold. There is no, right? And then the very next section, where you would look for, general guidelines, we get 3 or 4 paragraphs of best practices among Michigan local units of government and so forth, which is just a regurgitation of what we already do when we select, vendors for consideration. So it, as best I could tell, it just simply vanished from the purchasing policy. It doesn't appear anywhere else, and I've read through this, and I don't see anything that looks like QBS replaced in any of the, as Trustee Anderson referred to, the gallons of red ink. 17 pages, red ink on every page, and that one doesn't get replaced. It's just gone.
Trustee Foster, if you go
I'm looking,
number
yeah.
2, the standards for procurement is where that was crossed out, and then the red ink as described on page 8 is further detailed, further defining, included in there.
So the concept of that is still in here?
Yes.
Would you point me to that page?
Item 2, standards for procurement on page 7. And it's just expanded, the more detail is in the red ink.
Mr. Supervisor, just for clarification, that really just breaks down, as I understood it, it is not a replacement of the QBS. Well, maybe that is your replacement, but it is not the QBS process in any way. It is a listing of dollar amounts that go from $5,000 and $5,000 to $10,000, $10,000 to $15,000, how those are handled. But the QBS process is gone.
Trustee
Just,
Bosford?
are you saying that forming a team to review a bid? Is that what you're saying? David, is that what you're addressing?
Yeah, I'm talking the QBS format. The QBS format was something we spent a lot of time on. I know you were part of that, and it's gone.
Forming the team to review the contracts or whatever?
In part, yes. Yeah, but there was also, I mean, it's alluded to in the purchasing policy, but when, again, this was something that came to us through Supervisor Accavetti. He was pretty thorough in the suggestions, and it came actually from the state. State of Michigan is something that he brought here. So it was a little more involved than just a team, but yes, in essence, that's what it did.
And so what were some of the other involvements that you recall that you would like to see put in here?
So or
kept in here?
Yeah, in summary, I would just say the QBS process. That is how I would summarize it, because the process involved not only the appointment or the volunteering of board members, but also appropriate department heads from whatever the services that we were looking to take bids or interview vendors and so forth. And it also afforded a longer list of vendors that the QBS team then kind of shrunk down for the board's presentation. So it wasn't just a matter of sending out something for a bid and then the board receives, all of the packets and we pick. The QBS process afforded a deeper dive and a selection process after the vendors would come in to the QBS panel, and in the planning, the quest to hire the planner, we actually had presentations that came from a number of the vendors before it came to the board. So there was a lot of opportunity for a pretty informed and you kind of had to read up and make sure you were asking intelligent questions, but it was a good process that allowed us to get past what typically goes in government, which is this is the lowest qualified bidder. We were able to get a little deeper, and I think the QBS process works in most instances. So it was not good to see it stricken. I don't know why.
I just want to be clear, it's not stricken, it's within the new language, particularly on 2.1. Purchases above $15,000 require board approval. The purchases $10,000 to $15,000 are approved by the supervisor with the department head. Now granted, any and all contracts have to come to the board for approval. This is simply purchasing. I don't know how to phrase it better for you, but it's within, we didn't strike anything, we just removed some language that is not useful to us and included amounts, if you look on page 8, that are very specific. Anything over 15,000 comes to the board.
Mr. Supervisor, I know you've been briefed on this, but I've actually read it. And words mean things in the English language, okay? So when we have a qualified bid process, you can say all that you want to say about the doubt. I didn't interrupt you. You can say whatever you want. This is the second or third time you've referenced page 8. Page 8 does not contain anything involving a qualified bid process. I realize that all decisions ultimately come to the board. I'm simply pointing out that the QBS process was another layer so that the board, when you do get the presentation from the vendors, you're getting also a recommendation from the qualified bid process where your fellow board members have sat in a room for days, maybe even weeks, which was the planning vendor was a big contract, and we spent months. And I thought I got the same value from the QBS presentation on, say, the single waste hauler. I appreciated knowing that a fellow board member was in a room talking and going deeper into the process. So I appreciate the third reference to page 8, and I see that it's broken down between purchases of $5,000 and then $5,000 to $10,000. But the QBS process has been eliminated. You can call it something else. You can call it the supervisor and the department head and whatever you want to call it, but the QBS process has been removed from this purchase order, and it's not sufficiently replaced in the magical wording that the supervisor likes to focus on page 8.
Thank you. Any further comments? Trustee Vosberg.
So if this, I think I'm trying to understand, make sure I'm understanding it correctly. The QBS process, especially the part that has formed the teams, and the team that included a member of the board and the department head, Trustee Joseph, you're referring to that? Okay, so, and that has not been, I think it could be put in there. I think we can put that in there. I think let's have them work on that and include that concept in there. I think it's a good concept, especially for the large contracts like that.
Do you have the specific section you'd like to see in there? Would it be 2.1 reinstituted and put in there?
Yeah, can this be sent back, just because there could be other reasons we don't know that the team that put this together. Is there anyone else? If there's no one here to address that?
No, the finance director couldn't make it today. And again, this was a discussion that took place over periods of time.
Sure.
With conversations with the clerk, the treasurer, and department heads.
Mr. Supervisor, were you in those meetings?
Excuse me.
Were you in those meetings?
Yes, I was.
So is there a quick mechanism? I don't know, the procurement procedures that are in 2.1, it's not as simple, I think, Trustee Vosberg, to just say we're going to add this in, because it seems like there's a different direction in terms of how the dollar amount purchases are processed. So there's a philosophical shift, in my opinion, away from the QBS for any purchase, up to 15,000. I don't know at what point we kick in the QBS process, because under the proposed changes in 2.1, there's sort of a different policy for each dollar amount. From purchases less than 5,000, we go to a certain, and then 10,000 and so forth. So I don't know how in the proposed changes you continue with the QBS process. It might need to go back and be wordsmithed a little bit to find out how to integrate both of those. But I would be more apt to consider this if we had some changes, at least there, and maybe a little more information on the dollar amount as to why and how we got to 15. So I would make a motion to postpone, and I don't know how much time the team needs to sort of wordsmith this and bring it back. I'll leave it to whoever was on the committee and thinks, but either the next board meeting or 2 board meetings to revisit.
Will you provide the language you want to see included in this?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I'll amend my motion to table this for 2 weeks and bring it back. Waiting for the, and we'll work in the language that Trustee Joseph wants to see added. Trustee, pardon me? What meeting would you like to go? Pick the date.
I'm thinking 2 meetings.
2 meetings?
Yeah.
Maybe October 10th.
October 10th. I'll amend my motion to table this until 10/10 meeting, and we will wait the QBS language that Trustee Joseph would like to see added in the proper section. Trustee Glasser, would you continue supporting that?
Are you just a point of information, you're withdrawing your motion, or you're making a motion to postpone?
I will withdraw, I indicated I will withdraw my motion, and I will make a second motion to table this until 10/10, where the language that you would like to see in it, we will insert it in its proper location as you recommend.
I will email the board within the next couple of days. Parliamentary-wise, you're a little bit of a mess here. Clerk Berry, maybe you can help them out with that?
We're fine.
Okay.
We have it.
Trustee Vosberg, would you continue that support? Thank you.
I will support the table.
Thank you. Clerk Berry, would you call the roll?
Just to restate the motion to make sure that we're clear, and I believe that we are, this is a motion to postpone item 10B, the approval of the changes to APO 112019 purchasing policy until the October 10th regularly scheduled board meeting.
Correct.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph. Aye. Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Item 10C.
Item 10C is a recommendation by Supervisor Kersten to enter into a contract with DTE Energy to upgrade 7 street lights to LED lighting and add 10 new LED lights on Jefferson Avenue between Cotton Road and Sutton Road, not to exceed $20,000. I'd make a motion to approve as stated.
Support.
Motion by Clerk Berry, supported by Trustee Anderson. Ms. Garber, do you want to address this?
Yes, so we've had multiple residents come in and complain about the lighting on Jefferson, that it's hard to see when they're driving down Jefferson, particularly in this area. So we did reach out to DTE, and they did give us an estimated cost. So I asked them, one, can you make sure that the lights are all working correctly? That was the first question. So they came back, they said, yep, everything's working correctly. And then I asked them, so are the lights up to date? And they said they're not up to date. Unfortunately, they are all older lighting. If you did update them to the LED lighting, it would improve the lighting greatly in the area. They also said that there's not a lot of existing poles in the area that they could attach to. So what they did address was there were 10 wooden utility poles that were there that they could add the 10 new lights on, so that would help in the cost of it. If they had to add any more than that, then it would cost more money because we'd have to install the pole as well. And then they, but they said between changing the lighting to the LED lighting and installing the 10 lights on the existing wooden poles, that this would greatly increase the lighting in that area. And I know that a lot of the residents have come in lately addressing the lighting in in all different areas as well. So we are looking at, you know, each area and to see if we can upgrade lights and help the safety of our residents. So,
thank you. Comments from the board? Any comments from the board? I have a motion by Clerk Berry, supported by Trustee Anderson, to approve item 10C. Clerk Berry.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye. Item 11, there is an addendum to the agenda. Item 11A, Clerk Berry.
Item 11A is a recommendation by Public Services to approve the township to work with Macomb County to submit for the TAP grant in accordance with the township ordinances, with the intent to bid this project in 2024, with construction to commence in late 2024 or early 2025, assuming the grant is secured, and to adopt resolution number 2023-32, authorizing the township to coordinate with Macomb County to continue the TAP grant application process for the Jefferson Avenue pedestrian pathway with the above-mentioned revisions and items.
Do we have a motion to approve? Supervisor Kersten will make a motion to approve. Is there support? Support. Supported by Trustee Vosberg. Paul, if you would.
Yes, this is to amend the original May 24th a resolution that was approved on that date for the TAP grant. This is now, after going to the county, they would like to extend this a little further. The original grant was to bring it down Jefferson. This will now bring it up past the Meldrum Drain and connect it to the sidewalk with the bridge up by the middle school there. So that way we'll have a nice path coming down Jefferson connected to the bridge over there at the Meldrum Drain. And the increase for the township is due to the non-participating items in the original bid.
Questions from the board?
I have,
Trustee Vosberg.
thank you. So the increase, the match of the, it's a 676 and a few extra dollars contract cost, and estimated cost. Our share of that will be the 150,000?
Yes, that's correct. Our share will be the 150,000.
Thank you.
Trustee Anderson.
Thank you. I know we want to have this interconnection of paths throughout the township, and there's merit to it, sidewalks. I look at this specific project. I did not support it when it initially came up in May. I've lived in proximity to some of this proposed construction for 30-plus years. I worked at that building when it was a high school. We're talking about a 10-foot wide path that'll run from the, looks like Salt River, Sutton, along Jefferson, up to the Meldrum Drain, through the woods, the fields, behind the middle school south, ending up at the bridge that luckily was renovated about 8 years ago. I haven't seen any real maintenance of that bridge. It narrows down. I think I would ask parents, do you really feel comfortable letting your kids walk across the Salt River Bridge walkway there, and especially the area between the bridge and Sutton Road? I like to call it the Kadich Pass. But ride by there and take a look at it and see how safe do you feel letting little Johnny or Susie ride their bike. Just make your own decision. During the off-season, our kids loved to bring their four-wheelers or whatever, their gas-powered machinery, and run all around the back of the middle school. And I just wonder, placing this 10-foot wide path, no matter how great it is, in that basically very unpatrolled area. There's no streets around there. I know scout cars like to ride on paths. That might be a benefit. I just really question the entire project at this time, especially when, I'll stop right there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Trustee Joseph?
I'll pick up where you left off, especially when you have so many other areas in the township that are desperately in need of walkable paths. This is a great project if we had places that people could walk where they weren't mowed down by cars on their way to work, you know, but we have that going on in the township, and we seem to focus on resident sidewalks. You know, I can't tell you how many calls I've received from residents about their sidewalk replacement, how comforted they are in knowing that the quarter-inch gap out front that only cost them $2,000 is now repaired, and yet we have no inclusion in this proposal or the proposal that came to us in May with the estimated costs associated with owning, operating, the costs to the township being responsible for the engineering, permits, administration, potential cost of overruns, which is a common practice, and any non-participating items. So there's a number of costs associated with this in addition to the match, which weren't really part of the packet. And so I am really in favor of more desperately needed projects elsewhere before we commit the hundreds of thousands of dollars to this, which I think, Trustee Anderson, having lived there, you know what this gets in terms of 47,000 residents in the township, and I'm not sure how many of them will enjoy this path, but I can tell you that there are other areas in the township where people got to risk death to get from A to B, and we don't seem to be as concerned about those. So I'm really thinking that we should redirect our efforts and deploy our limited resources in places that could actually make an impact for more residents than this project will. So I'm a no.
Thank you. Treasurer Elliott?
Is there do you have any answers to the questions that Trustee Joseph has as far as cost breakdown?
From my understanding, the initial engineering is completed by SDA already, so there won't be any other initial engineering, anticipated additional costs for the engineering. And then the Part of the reason for the increase from the initial 135 to the 150,000 is to cover some of those non-participating items. That first was an estimate, and this is narrowing down a little more what we're going to have to pay out of pocket.
What are the non-participating items?
There is, it's the, right there, I believe it's the Sutton Road. There is work that's going to be done to the the road there, I believe, and then also down by the Meldrum Drain, the driveway coming into there, there's work that needs to be done there to improve that, and that is not included in the grant.
So this pathway will connect the current one. Where is this going to start? This is going to start.
This will start right at the end of the current walkway there at the Salt River at Sutton Road, and we'll head down Jefferson, down to the Meldrum Drain, and then connect into the middle school there.
Oh, okay, so it'll connect to the middle school. Where at the middle school will it end up at?
In the back by where the bridge is over the Meldrum Drain. It'll connect onto would be the northeast side of that Meldrum Drain. So they would not be required to cross that bridge.
So in order to use this path, would you be able to park at like the community center or the middle school and say you bring your bikes and you would be able to connect to it at both places or one or the other?
At this point in time, yes, you'd be able to park at the middle school and be able to access this path. You could also park at the Weber Paddle Park there, access this path. And eventually in the future, we would like to see it connected all the way to the community center there.
To the community center. So that's a part of the bigger vision.
Yes.
And this path is, so there's still one small piece from the middle school to the community center that we have to, right, still complete. And this is a part of a bigger vision. And I'm asking these questions. I just for clarity, a couple of things I want to mention. I personally live in the sub where Cotton Road, where the person had got hit. I've raised 3 children in this township and still have a minor at home. Pretty much for the entire time that I've lived in this township and raised children, I've had to pack my kids up in their bikes in the truck and drive over to the church there on Jefferson in order to take my kids for a ride, right? Because it isn't safe. There's no place where we can ride along the Gratiot corridor or anywhere over there unless you go into Waterside Marketplace. So there's 2 visions here. This is one of the 2. One of the visions that is to be able to connect this piece here from Brandenburg Park and get us to the community center. And then the other piece is to come from the Gratiot corridor or Waterside Marketplace, eventually over Cotton Road safely. Now, because you're crossing an expressway, that's a much bigger ask because now you have to involve a lot more different entities. But that pathway there is also something that we are working with several of the congressmen and congresspeople and senators and various organizations in order to try to solve that piece as well. So that is in the works, but it's because you have to go over an expressway. That's a much more difficult piece. But this piece here would at least provide some relief for that so that people can take and go out with their families and take a bike ride, and have a walk along there. And so that 10-foot path is what you're starting to see more common in order to do that. And so this is essentially something we've already discussed earlier, and this is just an increase because of some engineering specs, changes to the engineering. Is that correct?
Yes, as they were going through the grant, this is a request by the county to, yes, widen it to that 10-foot path.
Okay.
Treasurer Elliott, do you want to include the Safe Routes to School plan?
Yeah, there is a Safe Routes to School plan. There is, SEMCOG is having a training next week. I personally today sent out an email to Lance Cruz, Anchor Bay, and New Haven school superintendents, asking them to join myself and Karen Garby to do the training on getting the safe route to schools. They've made some changes to that program, and we're looking to try to get some more funding that way and grant funding through that program to be able to increase some of the pathways that are much needed in the township. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? Clerk Barry.
Paul, just real quick, and you may have discussed this the last time we talked about this project, but how is the determination made and how is it prioritized? As Trustee Joseph pointed out and Treasurer Elliott as well, we have a lot of places in the township that need these resources, these types of things. How is the prioritized and determined? Does it come from us? Does it come from the county? Is it part of the grant provision? If you can just remind us.
But my understanding is it's out of the grant provision is where it's guided to where we can use it at. And so this is going back to the county. That is why they requested the changes be made as well, because that's part of to fit it within that grant provision itself.
So this came from the county?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
And just the GAP program that was, the previous board had selected, there is a map available, and we try and highlight those areas where, number one, we can get funding from, we can partner with individuals, and this area in particular was available through the TAP grant. It ties into the schools, and it creates connectivity. So those are the ultimate goals when you're trying to check boxes in this. So.
Brad, can I just add to that real quick?
Pardon me?
Spalding DeDecker did a sidewalk study for us, and they did show us all the high traveled areas that need sidewalks, and they did number them for us. If you guys want me to send you that, I can. It's a pretty big map, but we do have it too, so I can show you guys. But they did number all the different areas in the township and what is high traveled.
Thank you, Karen. That would be helpful because I didn't see a map in the agenda packet. Thanks.
We used to have it back here. I don't know where it went, but we'll repost it and get it back in a lot.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the board?
Supervisor, isn't that, I think that map is right outside, right on the other side of the doorway. Would you mind if Karen brought it and put it out for the public to see? Karen, I think it's right in.
Either way, we'll make it available. We'll republicize it. We'll post it again. But there was a map that highlighted it. So, any further questions from the board? I have a motion by Supervisor Kersten, supported by Trustee Vosberg, to approve item, 11A. Clerk Berry?
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Nope.
Trustee Joseph.
No?
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Item 12, public comments. A reminder, there's a 3-minute time limit, and if you would, please state your name when you come to the podium. The clock will start.
Jeff Miller, 26591 Harvest Drive. Sidewalks definitely are important. Last year, you guys moved forward and got a sidewalk put in there at 24 Mile and Chesterfield Road to connect the sidewalk to Carcanord Elementary. However, though, they did leave a pile of concrete and a couple straw mats out there and never got back to seeding it or removing the concrete. Just thought I'd bring that up. What the real reason that I wanted to stop in, I've heard it a lot of times, is the Meldrum Drain. I've gone toe-to-toe with Macomb County Drain Commission about that drain. The drain needs to be re-excavated. It needs to be dredged. The phragmites are out of control. Nobody maintains that drain like they're supposed to in the neighborhood, in the community where that drain connects. The partnering properties that drain sits on the easement, they do not do the proper maintenance that they're supposed to do to keep the debris and the trees and the growth out of that drain to keep it flowing properly. That drain has been backed up for years north of 23 Mile Road. They did a nice job excavating it south of 23 Mile Road, but MDOT needed to go underneath the 23 Mile bridge there by Foster, and they didn't have the resources. And Scott Slezak from Macomb County Drain Commission, they came and knocked down a few arborvitaes just north of 23 2 years ago. I have all the pictures if anybody wants to see it. I've been doing this for a while. But nonetheless, The Meldrum drain, as far as I hope you guys have some type of plan in place to work on getting that dredged out and getting it back to its capacity where it is supposed to operate properly and not back up into a parking lot and across 23 Mile Road. I think it's an important aspect for you to look into, or at least get the Macomb County Drain Commission to look into, that would alleviate pump stations if we actually had the water flowing in and out of where it's supposed to go with the Army of Engineers drain that they originally put in many, many years ago. So that being said, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Before my time begins, I just want to say I was tempted to apologize for my outburst earlier, but I won't do that because I won't apologize for being passionate about my community. Supervisor Kersten, I'd like to bring up the Bass Festival. At the August 9th board meeting, you said that there was going to be an after-action meeting on August 9th at 9 a.m. and that a full report from the Bass Show would be made available. Has that report been completed? Is it available for the public to review? And in case the residents didn't know, this board spent $700,000 of our ARPA funds on the boat launches, over $85,000 on a pathway, and over $34,000 on modular floating dock system, and thousands to provide Wi-Fi at Brandenburg. While these funds were not specifically labeled for the Bass tournament, it's crystal clear why the money was spent, when and where it was. And if I'm correct, you violated the APO 092019 by spending special event money without prior approval. According to the APO, a letter of request addressed to the Board of Trustees was to be provided 90 days prior to the event. I am requesting a copy of that letter be provided to the residents. Your after-action report was supposed to compare the projected financial analysis with the after-event analysis. I suppose that's hard to do without actually having submitted the projected costs. And at the same August 9th meeting, Michelle Vanderson from Parks and Rec said that approximately 12,000 people touched the ground at Brandenburg Park during the Bass Festival. Considering that we have 48,000 residents, and also considering that a good number of the 12,000 people that touched the ground would have been Bass tournament folks and township employees that were working it, and also considering people from other communities probably attended the festival, that calculates to me that considerably less than 25% of the residents attended the event. And what's considered a successful community event? All the money and township resources that were spent on an event that less than 25% residents participated in. It's not very successful in my mind. I'd also like to touch back on the censorship topic. Even though this board has voted to limit the amount of time that residents can speak at these meetings, we are talking amongst ourselves, and I am rallying the troops. There is a Facebook page called Chesterfield Township Community Page in Places. It appears to me to be some sort of main unofficial resident page because it has over 29,000 members. However, it is run by the Washington Township Supervisor and a guy from Rochester Hills, neither of which has lived in Chesterfield for at least the last 18 years. That page has censored me since the end of July, and all I post is board information on there. While I haven't quite pieced together everything, I know that the Washington Township Supervisor is supporting Ms. Garby's run for New Baltimore City Council, so it appears that he does have some interest in what is going on in our side of town. But that's okay. Let them censor me on their page. There are a few other up-and-coming pages that more and more residents are paying attention to because they are actually run by residents for the residents. And for the residents that are watching or listening to this meeting, those pages are Chesterfield Township Community Page, News and Chat, Chesterfield, Michigan Unhinged, and Chesterfield, New Baltimore, New Haven, Lenox, and Richmond resident groups. I've been coming to these meetings for 9 months, but just so you know, I've really just gotten to the party. I saw a bumper sticker that read, "Unity is power," and I realized that's the key. So I'll be diligently working to unite the residents of Chesterfield and to keep them informed on what this board is doing, regardless of any attempts at censorship here or on social media.
Thank you, ma'am. Any further comments from the public?
Christopher Pierrick, 33862 Embassy. I just want to take a minute to apologize for my comment earlier about the billboard. Apologize to the residents, apologize to the board. That was an uneducated comment that I made. I apologize for my ignorance. I'm embarrassed. My face is red. If I had half of the information that Trustee Vosberg had, I would have been able to make a more educated comment. So sorry, I just feel like I've been left in the dark on that. So maybe I'll just keep my mouth shut. Oh, wait a minute. Thank you.
You don't have to keep your mouth shut, sir. Any further comments?
Paul Lafata. You mentioned earlier about the pump station and everything the township was doing. Township really needs to do a deep dive and a failure mode analysis. Go all the way back to 2019 approved budget, pages 70 to 76, where Supervisor Accavetti put our facilities and operations director in charge of that facility with the goal to keep the water off the roads and into the Meldon drain. And specifically mentions like the HVAC system, roofs and stuff like that. Walked by there today because I was walking my dog. There's weeds growing on the roof. So I'm not sure how we track responsibilities for assignments that are in the budget. But we've gone 4.5 years and now we have failures. The other thing is the exit piping into the Meldon drain's never been inspected since day one. But we don't do any preventive maintenance, and then when something fails, we make excuses. I talked to 4 of the neighbors in the proximity of that pump station, and none of them told me, they all told me the exact same thing. We did not hear the pumps running. The owner of the daycare center said that the storm drain on Mallard and Jefferson was shooting water up and not sucking water in. So there's a lot of problems. Plus, there's probably infusion from our sewage because the ditches were filled over the sewer manhole covers, and there was intrusion. And if you think there wasn't intrusion, go get the measurements from Great Lakes Water and see if there is a little bit more water going into the sewage system that we're going to get charged for. It's easy. The other thing you need to watch is you never do lessons learned, you never close out projects, but the Weber Paddle Park, well, you're going to put new light posts up and then you're going to put a pathway. Well, what they did is they put a path, they designed a pathway right in the middle of a new electrical pole in Weber Paddle Park. Costs the residents an extra 10 grand to get it removed. So Township doesn't manage anything. They don't close out projects. We still have a senior citizen center without a roof on a pavilion that should have been done 2 years ago. And we have all these side projects like floating docks that aren't doing anything right now. We blew $34,000 to naught. We don't take care of what's broken, but we have all these special projects that our facilities and engineers are supposed to be working on. That's why the HVAC system in this building doesn't work, because he doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know how to manage, and his manager doesn't know how to manage him. And there's 2 things in the township. One is there's a budget to operate within,
Thank you,
and
sir.
a set of rules.
Appreciate your comments. Further comments from the public?
John Speaker, Chesterfield Township. You know, I'm confident to say at this point, everybody laughed when Supervisor Lovelock got walked out by the feds, but I'm going to tell you, Mr. Lovelock will not be the only supervisor that gets walked out by the feds. Supervisor Kersten, you're not king in Chesterfield Township, so I got to constantly remind you that you work for us. You seem to forget that. This new process that you implemented, I observed tonight, like I always do, and I watched the board. This new process is really horrible. It sucks. Not to get residents' input on agenda items affects the residents, and it affects the board in the way you guys operate. You and your minions have proven that you can't be trusted. So, you and your rubber stamps cannot be trusted here in Chesterfield. You have failed the residents multiple times. And by yourself, I'm including Kathy Elliott in it. Trustee Vosberg at one point surprised me tonight because she did bring up some important issues. on holding off on a vote and what was important, what was going to go on that billboard. But in a split second, she totally flipped and she let you proceed. I thought we were going to delay it. And, you know, on that billboard, just so you know, Trustee Vosper, they can advertise whatever they want. They can advertise cannabis. If Kathy Elliott wants to, has any of her friends on OnlyFans, she can advertise whatever she wants on there. That can go on there, and you can't do anything about it. The other issue is I'm tired of getting phone calls on asking where you guys are on Mondays and Fridays in your office. Supervisor Kersten, you're MIA. Treasurer Elliott, you're MIA. So I've got 2 full-time employees here that cannot work a 40-hour work week. So it is absolutely ridiculous. And the residents want to know where you guys are. So you're not in your office, you're not in this building, but we're paying you. You work for us. Supervisor Kersten, why don't you return residents' phone calls? I've got a prominent resident, a business owner in this community that pays over $200,000 in taxes, and you won't even return his phone calls. He lives and has a house. You don't live in Chesterfield, and you don't pay property taxes. You're from Emmett.
Thank you, sir. Any further comments?
Joe Kadich, I live in Sutton. I guess I'd probably need about 2 hours to go through everything that happened here tonight, but I'm not going to rehash it. Everything that happened shouldn't have happened, but it's done. What I'd like to do is go over what my experience was during the flood. And heard nothing from Supervisor Kersten afterwards. The night of the flood, Thursday night, I kept going down into my basement. I live about a quarter mile off of Jefferson because I have a problem, had a problem 30 years ago and hadn't had one since, that I had a flooded basement. And what it was the lift station at the end of Sutton on Jefferson that pumps the water up and then down to the next lift station by the car wash on Jefferson. Didn't work then. Took about 6 years. They got it straightened out. They bought new pumps and everything. That's probably 30 years ago. And I don't know that anybody's done anything to make sure that those pumps are working again. And the night that, about probably 11 o'clock at night Thursday, I went down into my basement. I was more concerned about my not septic, but my other pumps working, pumping the water out, my sump pump. And I walked into about 3 or 4 inches of water at the bottom of my stairs. And I couldn't figure out where it was coming from. Turns out I've got a finished basement. It was like a fountain coming out of the toilet. So I knew something was wrong with that pump station down at the end of the road. That was for sanitary sewers. Sanitary sewers, you know, people are saying, well, my water migrated into it and it overcapacitated. That shouldn't have happened to begin with. That water and all of that water that rained should not have affected the operation of the sanitary sewers. I was concerned that maybe we lost power down there. I jumped in my car, went down there. I could hear one, or at least one of the pumps running. I tried to go down Jefferson to see the other one, but I couldn't even get as far as the Mink pump station. And I noticed that there was nobody there. There's usually a light on the side. At the side door, there's always a light on at night. Couldn't see a truck there, couldn't see anything. And I couldn't go any further because the damn road was flooded, probably about 6 inches over the tires of my car. I started trying to get through it, and I thought, I'm going to end up in a ditch someplace, because you couldn't tell where the road was. And I tried calling that night. I called 911. They told me all the guys are out working on stuff. I said, well, they're not here. You better get somebody out here. They had no way of contacting them. Apparently, nobody was giving them direction as to where they should be.
Thank you, sir. Any further comments?
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Observing tonight's meeting, I like to say that for me, it was sad, but I think more importantly, I think pathetic is a more appropriate word. Watching the nonverbal cues from the board, looking around at the attendees here, there's a major disconnect here. The arrogance and the condescending tone that a lot of these residents were spoken with is unacceptable. Everybody on this board, and I don't know any of you personally, so this is not a personal attack on anybody, but you do work for us. We do not work for you. Everybody talks about wants versus needs. If the board wants to spend their personal funds on needs versus wants, that's okay with, that's your money. But when it comes to the residents here, it's always needs versus the wants. Does it sound like this township has the funding for ancillary unnecessary expenses? So I think you need to be good stewards with the township funds through the tax base that we pay here. And I think that the lack of maintenance, and somebody had mentioned to me about the previous board didn't do the maintenance on this or whatever, but it doesn't matter. The previous board members are gone. It's you, and it's you that we're paying, and it's you who represents us. We don't represent you. And I think that we all need to stay focused and cognizant of that factor. I think the only other thing that we can say is if you want to make a change, you got to vote.
Thank you, ma'am. Further comments from the public?
All right, Mike Horton, 50393 Bauer. Mr. Joseph, thank you very much for talking about the fire department. They need to be discussed at every single meeting, and until that is done, I will continue to address that with the very limited time we are afforded here. Wow, 3 minutes to even comment on anything. What's even talk about now? Talk about how childish you guys continuously act. You want this to be more professional, yet you show no signs of professionalism yourselves. You look at the great disconnect you have with your own public. No one respects you. I don't know how you go home and look yourselves in the mirror, knowing that you have an elected title, and yet you don't act like it. You're trying to campaign to go to D.C. because you fit right in there. Everyone knows it's a clown show there. You can do better. All you got to do is just be better than what you are tonight or in any previous meeting. All you just got to do is be better. It's a very low bar. Just focus on that. You know, it's the first time I ever saw flooding in this community, and I had to personally witness it. I joked that I had lakefront property, and I was thankful that we didn't have our basement flood, but we had our garage flood. My neighbor lived there for 44 years. He never saw this. He had a couple inches in his basement. 44 years, never saw this. This is something that needs to be addressed. And I do not blame anybody on this board for what happened as an act of God. Can't blame someone for that. But perception is everything. Mr. Supervisor, you had pretty bad tone-deaf response the next day, having a private meeting with all the bigwigs. But that's what we are. We're plebes to you, the board. Even though, in my viewpoint, some of you are knaves. This is an oligarchy and a kakistocracy. Look those up, and you'll be shocked to see. This is not what we have in this country that we want to be. You are eroding the ideals of democracy and the very foundations of the republic. For what? So you become king of a pile of rubble? Is this the neo-feudalism you wish to impose? Will you quash dissent at any point in time? You've limited comment. You've constantly berate citizens in this community. For what? For what? For this? Is this your kingdom? Look around you. It's not worth even defending anymore. This is how Rome fell. And you don't see anyone cheering it on. And what is this? Is this the future? Is this what we're supposed to submit these now? Because if that's the case,
Thank you, sir. Any further public comments? You don't have to pick it up. You can leave it there.
I clean up my computer.
Any further comments from the public? I'll bring it back up to the board. Trustee Vosberg.
Mike Rayner, 26175 Jack Grove Lane, just arriving from Gilda's Club in Royal Oak. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Interesting conversation. All of us sat there discussing losing our wives or husbands. A very touching, loving relationship. And then I thought, am I really going to come? Am I going to try to make this meeting tonight and listen to all of this unbelievable animosity, hatred? Of course, I could go to any government anywhere. I mean, I didn't have to come here. I can go to Washington. I can go anywhere because that's our atmosphere. That's where we're living in this all about me society in these absolutely divided states of America. I'm so sick of this, I can't believe it. This is not looking good, folks, and you're a good example of what doesn't look good. I just have to express my concern with what the heck is going on here and everywhere. Not just here, you're not the only ones, but you're pretty crummy examples of the way we don't work together, the way we don't solve problems. One nation indivisible, that's old news. No, one nation divided. I don't know where the hell this is leading us, but this is a pretty sad situation. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to try to get the masses to maybe vote, just like the turnout. Isn't this pathetic? You have that same group of people. Janice, she pleads on Facebook every day, please attend the meeting. But no, you know, too many of us don't really care. You know, it doesn't involve us. Shut off the news, I can't listen to it anymore, I'm dropping out. Well, we'll see what the consequences of dropping out is and what the consequences of this sort of working together is. This is not what America used to be, but you know, you're just another example of what we are today. I'm just disappointed that we can't be the exception rather than the rule.
Thank you, sir.
Am I okay? Thank you. Nancy Hutchinson, 49525 Callens Road. I was one of the lucky ones who stayed dry. But I think that it would have helped at least this small group, if not the larger community, had Mr. Kersten shown up that Friday morning when Good Morning America was in our community. Nobody blames you for the flood. But when everyone went looking for you, news media, Good Morning America, nowhere, nowhere. Left the residents. You know, would it have hurt you to say, gosh, I can't believe this happened. You know, we're doing all we can to help. I think it might have. Might have helped your reputation in the community. Just to show you care. Even if you had to put on a happy face and pretend you care, I think it would have helped. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any further comments from the public? Bring it back up to the board. Trustee Vosberg, start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I would first like to take this time to recognize that this coming Friday, September 15, is the National POW MIA Recognition Day. And I wanted to point out 2 events that will be happening near here. One is in Clinton Township at Resurrection Cemetery from 3 to 9, when the American chapter, the Vietnam Veterans of America Chapter 154 and its Honor Guard will be hosting a ceremony. That starts at 6, but they will be there from 3 to 9. During that time, they will have some other activities. And the second one is the Veterans of Foreign War, Lemke Blackwell, VFW Lemke Post, is holding a POW MIA ceremony at 4:30 on Friday at its hall on 23 Mile Road. Following that, there is a dinner that people can attend if they wish to pay for that. I want to speak briefly, whatever time I have left, and you can cut me off when I'm done. This was kind of an awkward meeting because it was the first time under these new rules, but I found it easier for me as a board member to sit here. I'm very happy to hear whatever, willing and happy to hear whatever comments people have, willing to help during the week with whatever needs to be taken care of. Whatever needs you have, I can't solve them all, but I can help you find places to do that. And as we know, many people had different variety of problems under the flood, for example. We'll help you find what you need if you haven't already found it. The other thing is I appreciated the atmosphere on the board table tonight. We had good discussions. People brought up things. There was give and take, and I appreciated that. Thank you.
Trustee Anderson.
At the August 22nd meeting, revisions to APO 4-2018 were introduced. A fellow board member invested a copious amount of time then addressing what or was not department reports. The obvious focus of the changes were to deny the public's ability to a 3-minute comment period during a discussion of each agenda item before the board's action. The new changes in place tonight now restrict our residents and our stakeholders to a 3-minute period to address all the night's agenda, irregardless of the cost or what they are, at the beginning of the meeting, and you get 3 minutes at the end. I believe that many of our residents and members of the public have the skill set, knowledge, expertise, and professional certifications that far exceed ours as board members. Their input should be encouraged in the process instead of excluded, rather than the current practice of including items on the agenda that seem to have the guaranteed 4 votes to pass. Mr. Supervisor, during your August 22nd board comments, you indicated that somebody gave me my remarks to read, or words to that effect. Pathetically, how ill-informed you were. They were creations of mine and mine alone. If I hurt your feelings, made you feel sad or angry, I tender you an apology, as that was not my intent. I was only citing events as I saw them. I'd like to congratulate Sergeant Michael Ogden and Lieutenant Robert Fitzpatrick on their promotions. Final observation here, wow, there's a lot of time here. I see my partner up here, Mr. Joseph, taking copious notes during the meeting. He uses his board comments to address many of the concerns to you as residents by name that you bring up during a meeting. He has done that objectively and well done. Now he's relegated to 3 minutes, and you all get the opportunity to play pen pals with board members in your government. I will end it there. I'd love to give the remainder of my time to Mr. Joseph, but I wish you all a good night, and thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Yeah, it is difficult, and as Trustee Anderson mentioned, I do write down from the beginning to the end every comment, every question that I think I can answer. I started with Ms. Hutchinson when she was talking about the Phragmite, and I got all kinds of responses. I'll never be able to get to it in the 3 minutes. So I would ask, this is your house. As I said before, all you got to do is simply stay in your seat when he pounds the gavel and says meeting adjourned. I'm glad that Trustee Vosberg was comforted by the new policy. I sat here sick to my stomach because I could see on the faces as the presenter that talked about the indignation that she felt from the nonverbal that went back into the audience, and it is really palpable. It's obvious that the residents are something to be worked around. The majority of this board feel that the residents are something that you have to work around, and it's the opposite. It's the complete opposite. So I will stay. I'm already a minute in, so I got to be very judicious in my time. I will stay and offer my answer to any question that was posed at the podium. I will tell you this: the comments about tone deafness are 1,000% accurate, but I wouldn't waste any time with that. It's not relevant. The only time that's relevant is at the polls. And if you want this kind of stick in the eye, he's your guy. He's your guy. If you'd like some input, we got to find another supervisor. That's just that simple. So as it relates to the flooding, there will be a special event on Thursday. I wrote an email to the board on August 2nd asking for a special town hall. Not surprised, supervisor will not be available for that, I understand. He's got other important things to do, whatever they may be. It won't matter if it's me, Clerk Berry, Trustee Anderson, and the people in this room. We're going to listen to you and hear stories about Mr. Kadich, your experience and so forth, and then try, hopefully, to get answers that night, but if not, we'll forward it to the appropriate people. I would end my comments with you, Mr. Rayner. Don't give up hope. You left a pretty special meeting. I'm sure Gilda's Place is a phenomenal resource. I had a similar experience before I came here at the library tonight. I heard from a woman by the name of Irene Miller, whose work and memoir was commissioned by the University of Michigan. She's a Holocaust survivor. She's been through unspeakable tragedies and the worst in humankind. She spends her life bringing good to the world. Don't allow the frustration you feel to dampen that spirit that you have. Just continue to bring love and goodness into the world, and it catches. Thank you, sir.
Treasurer Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I want to thank the board for collaborating and working together on the purchasing policy. I look forward to more work on that, and I think this was a great dialogue here tonight. I wanted to also say that for me, I believe that we live in a very beautiful community, and it is unfortunate how much of the, you can't see things because of Phragmites. So those of you who have come up and are talking about Phragmites, that's been something that we've had a lot of conversation. I know Mr. Kadich and I have had conversation. We've talked about it at SEMCOG. There are various, it's a difficult invasive species to get a handle on, but I think if we work together as a community, we are able to make some inroads on that. And also want to thank everybody for being cognizant about sidewalks and non-motorized paths. And thank you. Continue to keep talking about those things. Continue to help bring ideas and make suggestions, whether it's the comment cards or phone calls or an email. Lastly, I'd like to make this suggestion, and I know that I have emailed the supervisor about it. Been looking into, it looks like I believe we need a stormwater management plan, and I know that I had mentioned that to you, and I know he's looking into that. And so that would be something that I think we could probably work on in the next year. Thank you, and good night.
Clerk Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. It's been a long time since I've been on a timed speaking, but I used to do this back in high school. I was on the forensics team, for those of you who know that. My parents thought I was just be dealing with dead bodies. No, that's competitive speaking, and we have to keep time. So it's been a long time since I've done it, but I appreciate it, and we'll try to respect that. A couple of things to cover. First off, the Resident Assistance Town Hall that Trustee Joseph alluded to. I have been asked to moderate that. To give you an idea of what the format is going to be, we have invited all of your elected officials from the county, the federal government, Congressman McLean, both U.S. senators, the state senator Kevin Hertel, all the state representatives, all of the county elected officials who represent this area, including all of the countywide Big Four elected officials. Everyone has been invited, and we understand it's a short notice for them, but we are hoping that they or their office will send some sort of resource here, even if it's in the form of printed material, to give our residents some direction and where they can receive assistance regarding the flooding issues or any of the other issues that they had as a result of the recent storms. So we're hoping that they do that. As Trustee Joseph said, even if they don't participate, we do plan to forward all of your comments or statements to them, and hopefully someone will reach out to you from those offices and offer whatever assistance it is, even if it's just an ear to listen. They can do that for free. So, but we understand a lot of them are committed elsewhere, and it was a very short notice, but we appreciate any assistance. So anyone who does come, I'll be kind of moderating those speakers and then making sure that we gather all of your comments in order to forward those on as well. So that'll be my function that evening, and I'm happy to do that. Also, I had mentioned that the Coffee with the Clerk office hours are going to be reinstated. The reason we have not posted those yet is we are waiting on a couple of election-related dates, and I didn't want to have to keep making changes. So I will post those available kind of office hours for you as soon as those decisions are made. The Election Commission will meet again on September the 28th at 10 a.m. That is a public meeting for those of you who are interested in seeing an Election Commission meeting. The Election Commission sets the various rules for the upcoming election as far as assigning the precinct election inspectors and setting forth some of the procedural matters. So that is what we do at those meetings. The next one, like I said, is the 28th of September at 10 a.m. Also, I would like to let everyone know that our staff was recognized in a recent Macomb Daily article. We issued the first cannabis license here in Chesterfield on September the 1st, and our staff was absolutely outstanding, and you can read that article. Last and not least, the North Gratiot Cruise will take place September 23rd. I encourage you to go to their website. They've got a lot of great features and functions that are being added, and up until recently, it was the township's most popular event. So I think it will be again this year. Thanks.
Thank you. Real quick, I'll just address one of the questions. Mr. LaFata, we questioned a $23,000 invoice. That invoice was approved by the board, and it was part of the bond sale. Mr. Beatty, nice to see you. I didn't recognize you immediately. The mutual aid system's been in place, and you're spot on. It's worked flawlessly for years. It's been instituted here. It works to this day, and they still utilize it. So the number of staffing that arrives on the scene for firefighters is long entrenched here in Chesterfield Township, and I believe it's one of the first ones in the state, if I go back to your era. Drains and culverts. This is regards to the flooding, and again, this is one of the practices or one of the immediate meetings we reached out for. We have a problem with drains and culverts, as one of the residents said, the Meldrum drain. We were already in discussions with Commissioner Miller's office, and that drain was already on the target, and they have agreed to come back and look at it and expand it. The other issue that we're looking at is drains and culverts for driveways. Those are individually, the ditches along the roadways are maintained by the Department of Roads, and the culverts, whether they're plugged, collapsed, or not flowing water, is the responsibility of the homeowners. And we, again, have another meeting scheduled with the Department of Roads to begin to address that. There are several areas that throughout this township where these are problematic. The unfortunate side is, again, it's the responsibility of the homeowners for that driveway culvert. But we're going to look at a ditching program and a culvert program and see if we can't create some sort of partnership with the Department of Roads. The reference to the overpass and unfortunate incident of a pedestrian getting struck, we began that discussion with MDOT and the Department of Roads, I want to say going back 3 years ago, and it's actually started when Supervisor Accavetti was here, to create some sort of pathways or pedestrian crossings over the overpasses here in the township. We technically have none. It's well known. And we applied for a grant and was actually denied by MDOT, I want to say about 10 months ago, to look at expanding particularly the Cotton Road overpass. They did put us, and we had a broader conversation, not only with MDOT, with the facilitation of our lobbyist group in Lansing, we actually had a conversation and a project plan to discuss all of the overpasses in this township to gain access. They're under construction on 23 Mile Road right now. There was design efforts to put in on that existing structure a pedestrian crossway. Although not ideal, we'll continue to work on it.
Mr.
That being
Supervisor,
said-
I'd like to make a motion to suspend the board rules and allow you to finish informing the residents.
I'm good. I pretty much covered everything that I was going to say tonight, so I'm good. I appreciate that. Item 15, adjournment. Take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Clerk Berry, supported by Supervisor Kersten. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting's adjourned at 9:30.